It was the night before one of the most highly anticipated fights in boxing history. Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated champion, stood in his hotel room, mentally preparing for what would undoubtedly be another dominant performance in the ring. His focus was unshakable, his routine flawless. Everything was set up for him to add another victory to his already legendary career. But then, just as the clock struck midnight, an unexpected phone call shattered the calm of the evening, changing the course of the fight and potentially Floyd's entire career. What he would hear on the other end of the line was something that would leave him and the entire world speechless. The call came in like any other, a simple ring that barely caught his attention. But when Floyd looked down at the screen, he saw the number flashing, unknown caller. His first instinct was to ignore it, dismissing it as a wrong number or a fan calling with another random question. But something inside him told him this call was different. This wasn't just any phone call, it was something more. Hesitating for a moment, Floyd answered, his voice steady, but there was an unease lingering just beneath the surface. What followed next would be a conversation that, for reasons beyond even Mayweather's control, could not be ignored. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. It was a deep, unmistakable tone that seemed to resonate with an eerie familiarity. "Floyd," the voice said, "tomorrow's fight won't go the way you expect." At first, Floyd thought it was some kind of joke or prank, but the words carried a weight that made him pause. How could anyone know about his fight so intimately? How could they predict what was about to happen? As the voice continued, its cryptic message grew even more unsettling, sending chills down Floyd's spine. Each sentence seemed to unravel his mental preparation, poking at the one thing he never allowed to falter, his confidence. The voice on the phone made a chilling prediction, telling Floyd that the match would be a turning point, though not in the way everyone anticipated. "You've been undefeated for years, but this fight, this will change everything." Floyd's heart raced. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this wasn't just about his opponent. This was something bigger, something outside the realm of what he had prepared for. And just before the line went dead, the caller added one final phrase, a chilling whisper that left Floyd with more questions than answers. "Trust no one tomorrow, not even yourself." Floyd immediately dialed his trainer, his close friends, but no one had any answers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something beyond his control. Could this be a warning? Or was someone trying to mess with his head before one of the biggest fights of his life? The more Floyd thought about it, the more uneasy he became. He was a man who had always thrived on precision, focus, and control, but this unsettling call had put a crack in his usual composure. The clock ticked away, and the anticipation of his fight loomed closer. But now, in the back of his mind, the mysterious phone call loomed even larger. As the time for the fight drew near, Floyd couldn't help but replay the conversation over and over in his head. What did it mean? Who would be so bold as to make such a call? And why him? Was it an elaborate mind game from his opponent? Or was there a deeper conspiracy at play, one that even Floyd himself couldn't fully comprehend? His thoughts were clouded, and as much as he tried to shake it off, he couldn't escape the sense of impending change. Something was going to happen tomorrow, something that would make this fight stand apart from the rest. The morning of the fight arrived, but Floyd wasn't the same. He went through his warm-up routine, but his focus was scattered. The usual fire in his eyes was replaced with a sense of uncertainty. His team noticed it immediately, but no one dared to ask him what was wrong. Was it the weight of the mysterious phone call or just the pressure of another high-stakes match? No one could tell, but one thing was clear: Floyd Mayweather wasn't walking into the ring that night as the man who had taken down every opponent before him. He was walking into the unknown. As he stepped into the arena, the crowd erupted in cheers, but Floyd's mind was somewhere else. His body moved on autopilot, but the feeling that something was about to happen, something he wasn't prepared for, hung heavily over him. Was this the fight that would define the rest of his career, or would it mark the beginning of something far more sinister? But just as the bell rang to signal the start of the match, another phone call came through, cutting through the roaring noise of the arena. Floyd's heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same voice from before, or was it someone else trying to get into his head once again? What would it say this time? And more importantly, would Floyd listen, or would this mysterious force on the other end of the line finally reveal its true intentions? The fight began, but the questions lingered. Floyd's focus wavered as the mystery behind the phone call threatened to consume him. What was about to unfold in that ring would leave everyone watching, including Floyd himself, speechless. Would he conquer his fears and emerge victorious? Or would this fight change everything he thought he knew about his career and the world of boxing? The tension was building. The clock was ticking. And one thing was certain: Floyd Mayweather's next move could determine the fate of the fight, but also the truth behind that haunting phone call. What was the real story behind the mysterious voice? Stay tuned, because the answer is about to be revealed. As the fight wore on, the crowd's roar seemed to fade into the background for Floyd. His mind, once razor-sharp, was now a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. He had been here before, in the ring, under the lights, with the weight of millions of eyes on him, but tonight was different. There was a heaviness to his every step, a sense that the world wasn't quite what it seemed. The bell rang, signaling the end of the first round, and for the briefest of moments, Floyd allowed himself to look around the ring. His opponent was intense, focused, but Floyd's mind wasn't entirely on him. His thoughts were still with that phone call. Who could it have been? What did they know? Back in the locker room, Floyd's trainer, a man who had seen it all, couldn't help but notice the shift in his fighter. Floyd was pacing, muttering under his breath, clearly unsettled. "You good?" the trainer asked, his voice laced with concern. Floyd didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed his water bottle, eyes distant, as though lost in a conversation only he could hear. "Who called you?" the trainer pressed, sensing something deeper than pre-fight nerves. But Floyd only shook his head, unwilling to say more. The man who had once been so composed was now an enigma, a fighter caught between reality and something far more sinister. Meanwhile, the mysterious caller had yet to make another appearance. It had been hours since that fateful conversation, and Floyd couldn't help but wonder why the call had come at all. Was it a threat? Or was it a warning one that only made sense when the fight was over? Floyd had fought against some of the world's toughest, most strategic boxers. But never had he faced an opponent like this, an unknown force that seemed to know him better than he knew himself. In the corners of the arena, other fighters had heard the rumors. They whispered among themselves, wondering if Mayweather had lost his edge, if the weight of the mystery was getting to him. Some of them even talked about their own experiences with strange calls and strange feelings before big fights, but no one had ever shared an experience like this. They didn't know what it was, but there was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that something was waiting to explode. As the fight progressed, it became increasingly clear that Floyd's movements weren't as sharp as they used to be. His timing was off. His reflexes were slower. Was it just the pressure of the fight, or was there something more? The media, always on the lookout for the next big story, couldn't ignore the subtle changes in Mayweather's demeanor. A few reporters had caught glimpses of the man who once seemed invincible, now looking almost vulnerable. They speculated, of course, but none could get to the heart of the matter. No one knew about the phone call. No one knew about the threat hanging over his head and how it was changing the course of this fight. They just saw a fighter who wasn't quite himself, and that was enough to fuel their narrative. They turned their cameras on him, trying to capture every little crack in his armor. In the midst of the chaos, a new figure emerged, someone who had been quietly observing from the sidelines. A woman, cloaked in mystery, whose presence seemed to pull the strings behind the scenes. She wasn't a fighter, nor was she a member of Floyd's team. But she had been following his career for years, and she had a history with the sport that no one knew about. Her face was familiar to only a few, and her motives were even less clear. But what everyone in the arena didn't realize was that she had been watching Floyd's every move, every moment of this fight, as though she were waiting for something, waiting for him to break. She knew what the call had meant. She had seen the same signs before. The same hesitation. The same struggle to keep control. The woman's involvement in the sport was far deeper than anyone could imagine. She had once been a fighter herself, but not in the ring. She had fought battles that no one could see, against forces much larger than the men in the ring. And now, she was backpacked to collect on a debt that had been building for years. No one knew who she was, not truly. But she was watching Floyd closely, waiting for the right moment to make her move. As the rounds wore on, the tension was building. The clock was ticking down, and Floyd could feel it. Every punch, every movement, every second that passed seemed to drag him deeper into a web of uncertainty. The voice on the phone had told him to trust no one, not even himself. But how could he trust someone who hadn't even given him a name? How could he navigate this fight without knowing who or what was pulling the strings behind the scenes? And then it happened. In the midst of a flurry of punches, as Floyd moved to dodge a particularly fast jab, something unexpected happened. A brief moment of dizziness, a flash of disorientation. Just enough to throw him off his game. For a split second, he thought he saw the figure of the woman standing just outside the ring, her eyes locked onto him with a knowing look. Was it real? Or was it another manifestation of the stress that had begun to cloud his mind? But in that fleeting moment, the impact of the punch landed, and Floyd staggered back, his vision momentarily blurred. The crowd gasped. Was this it? Was the undefeated Mayweather finally going to lose? The energy in the arena shifted. The atmosphere was charged with uncertainty, and for the first time in years, Floyd's confidence seemed to waver. He had been hit before, and harder, but this felt different. He had always known how to recover, always had the mental toughness to shake off anything. But now, with the mystery of the phone call and the sudden wave of doubt, he was fighting not just his opponent but himself. As the round ended, Floyd stumbled back to his corner, breathless, his mind racing. He couldn't understand it. Why did this fight feel so different? What had he missed? What had changed? And as he sat there, eyes darting around, his trainer looked at him with growing concern. You need to focus, Floyd. This is your fight. But even his trainer, who had been with him through it all, couldn't understand what was happening inside his head. Outside the ring, the woman watched. Everything was going according to plan. But the question now was, would Floyd Mayweather be able to recover, or was he already too far gone to fight the unseen forces working against him? The next round would tell the story. The real story. But what happened next? That was the question on everyone's mind. The bell rang for the next round, and Floyd Mayweather stood there, trying to shake off the fog clouding his mind. He could feel the weight of the arena pressing in on him, every eye on him, every camera trained in his direction. He had fought in front of thousands before, But never had he felt so exposed, so vulnerable. His muscles burned and his breath was shallow, but it wasn't the physical toll that was getting to him. It was the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach, the sense that something was slipping away from him, just out of reach. As the fight resumed, his opponent sensed the shift. The fighter across the ring wasn't the same person who had entered the match full of bravado. Floyd's moves had slowed, his punches lacking the usual power and precision. His opponent, a seasoned boxer himself, pressed the advantage, landing blow after blow. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, sensing the tension, the uncertainty in the air. Floyd's mind was clouded. His body didn't respond the way it usually did. Was this the end of his undefeated streak? The thought was too much to bear, and yet he couldn't shake it. In the crowd, the mysterious woman watched intently. Her eyes never left Floyd as he struggled to regain his rhythm. She had known it wouldn't be easy. There was too much at stake, too much uncertainty surrounding this fight. But what no one could have predicted was the strange turn of events that was about to unfold. As Floyd stumbled back after another punch, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. It was a strange feeling. He hadn't even realized he had brought it with him into the ring. He reached down, confused, but it wasn't until his glove brushed against the device that the reality hit him. The phone call. The voice. Was it possible that the call had somehow triggered this? Could it be that this was all part of a larger plan, something orchestrated long before this night? Floyd's trainer noticed the phone vibrating and signaled to him urgently. "Get rid of that damn thing, Floyd." But Floyd, now standing in the center of the ring, couldn't help but pause. The buzzing was a constant reminder of the eerie voice that had told him to trust no one. Was this fight still his to win? Or was he being played like a pawn in some twisted game? He didn't know, but what he did know was that he needed answers and fast. The phone buzzed again, this time in a rhythm that almost felt like a heartbeat. Floyd's heart raced as he finally decided to pull the phone out of his pocket, ignoring his trainer's warning. His fingers, still encased in his gloves, struggled to unlock it, but when he finally did, his breath caught in his throat. The caller ID was blank. No number. No name. Just an empty space where the information should have been. It was as if the caller didn't want to be traced, didn't want to be found. And then the screen lit up with a message, a cryptic text that read, "The real fight is not in the ring. Look closer. It's always been closer than you think." Floyd's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about the fight anymore. This wasn't just about his career. This was something deeper. Something that tied into the very fabric of his life. But what? What could it possibly mean? As Floyd looked up, his opponent took advantage of his distraction, landing another powerful punch that sent Floyd reeling. He stumbled back, barely able to stay on his feet. The crowd gasped. Could this really be happening? Was Floyd about to lose after all the years of dominance, after the meticulous planning, after everything? In the locker room, the mysterious woman finally made her move. She slipped past security, unnoticed by the staff, and into the shadows where she knew Floyd's trainer would be. She had waited for this moment for a long time. The time when everything would fall into place. Her gaze was cold, calculating, and as she stood there in the dim light, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had planted the seed of doubt in Floyd's mind. She had set the stage for the biggest twist of all. Now, all she had to do was wait for it to unfold. Her eyes never strayed from the television screen in the corner of the room where Floyd's fight was still playing out. She knew the fight was nearing its climax. Floyd was on the ropes, both literally and figuratively. But that was part of her plan. She wasn't just fighting to beat him in the ring, she was fighting to destroy everything he thought he knew about his life, his career, and himself. But even she hadn't anticipated just how far Floyd would go to uncover the truth. As the text message burned in his hand, a new wave of adrenaline surged through him. This wasn't just about proving he was the best fighter in the world anymore. This was about survival. The more he thought about the cryptic words, the more they gnawed at him. Look closer. What was it he had missed? What had been right in front of him all along? It was then that he noticed something, a small detail that had escaped his attention earlier. The way the lights in the arena flickered. A strange shadow in the corner of the room. The feeling that someone was watching him more closely than the thousands of fans cheering from the stands. He had always been aware of the pressure, of the eyes on him, but this was different. It felt like someone was in the ring with him, someone whose presence was far more dangerous than any opponent he had ever faced. Floyd shook his head, trying to focus, but the anxiety clawed at him. The audience's cheers seemed distant, and the air in the arena thickened, suffocating him. For a brief moment, the image of the woman flashed across his mind again, her cold eyes, her confident posture. Was she the key to all this? Or was she simply another distraction in this game of shadows? The clock was ticking, and Floyd had little time to figure out who or what was behind it all. With a burst of energy, Floyd landed a counterpunch, catching his opponent off guard. But even as his opponent stumbled back, Floyd couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. There was something darker at play here, and Floyd was about to find out just how deep this conspiracy ran. The fight wasn't just for victory anymore, it was for the truth. And the truth, as Floyd was about to learn, had a price far higher than he could have ever imagined. Floyd's heart raced as he landed that counterpunch, the force of it propelling his opponent backward. The crowd erupted in a deafening cheer, but for Floyd the cheers felt distant, like they were coming from another world. His body was still moving on instinct, but his mind? It was somewhere else entirely. The words from the text message looked closer. It's always been closer than you think kept echoing in his head. The flickering lights. The shadow in the corner. The woman watching from the sidelines. Everything was connected, and it was all starting to make sense. But the question was it too late for him to uncover the truth? Floyd's opponent, seemingly shaken, regrouped quickly, realizing the momentum was shifting. But Floyd wasn't just fighting for a win anymore. He was fighting for answers. As he circled his opponent, his eyes scanned the crowd, the arena, the corners of the ring. And that's when he saw her again. The woman. She was standing near the back of the arena, her face partially obscured by shadows, but there was no mistaking her presence. He knew, without a doubt, that she had something to do with this, everything that had happened. Every moment of doubt, every strange feeling, it had all been leading to this. She was the key. Floyd moved toward the ropes, his trainer shouting at him to stay focused, but he couldn't shake the pull of the mystery that was about to unfold. The woman hadn't just been watching the fight, she had been watching him. But why? What did she want? Was she the mastermind behind the strange phone call? And if so, what was her endgame? His opponent, sensing Floyd's distraction, lunged in with a powerful jab, but Floyd dodged it with ease, his reflexes suddenly sharp again. It was as though the puzzle pieces were falling into place. The disorientation, the strange phone call, the cryptic message, it wasn't a coincidence. He had been set up. This wasn't just a fight against a boxer. It was a fight against a system, a conspiracy that had been quietly manipulating his every move. His opponent wasn't just a challenger. He was a pawn in a game that Floyd hadn't even known he was playing. The crowd was on its feet, chanting Floyd's name, But the world around him seemed to narrow to just the woman, the shadow, and the realization that everything he had ever believed was being turned upside down. This wasn't about boxing anymore. This was about something far bigger. Suddenly, as if by design, the lights in the arena flickered one more time, plunging the room into near darkness. The crowd gasped in confusion, the noise becoming a murmur of uncertainty. In the split second of darkness, Floyd's mind raced. Was this the moment? Was she going to make her move? As the lights slowly came back on, he saw her again, closer now, standing at the edge of the ring, her eyes locked onto his. But this time, she wasn't just observing. She was reaching for something hidden beneath her coat. Something familiar. Floyd's instincts kicked in. Before he could stop himself, he lunged toward her, but as he did, the woman revealed a small black device, something that looked eerily like the phone he had just used. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the truth. The call, the message, the woman, they were all connected. But in that moment, everything froze. The device wasn't just some form of communication. It was controlling the fight itself. It had been feeding him false signals, manipulating his senses, planting the seeds of doubt in his mind. The very fight that he had thought was his was nothing more than a simulation, a staged event meant to break him, to strip away his confidence and force him to question everything. The woman didn't speak. She didn't need to. Floyd understood now. This wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger. The fight was never real. The conspiracy had been brewing for years, using him as a test subject, manipulating his every move to see if they could break him, bend him to their will. The phone call, the messages, the strange glitches in reality, it had all been part of the plan. And now, in front of a live audience, Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated champion, was being shown the truth. The woman stepped forward, a smile creeping across her face. "You're not the only one being watched, Floyd," she said, her voice smooth, almost too calm. "You've always been under observation. Every fight, every step. This was just the beginning." Floyd's world spun, his thoughts racing. The entire fight, the entire career had been engineered for one purpose: to break him, to expose him. The undefeated champion brought to his knees, not by his opponent's fists, but by the invisible forces that had been pulling the strings all along. And then, in an instant, everything went black. The arena, the lights, the people, all of it disappeared as though it had never existed. Floyd blinked, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself alone in a dark room. The only thing that remained was the sound of his own heartbeat, pounding in his chest. The fight had never been about boxing. It had always been about control. And Floyd Mayweather, for all his skills, had just become the pawn in the most elaborate game of them all. As he sat there in the silence, the last message from the phone buzzed in his hand again. The real fight is only beginning. The world he knew had changed forever.